good evening and welcome to Monday night here on our DJNTV chat night. And tonight I am joined by a good friend of mine, Scott Carroll. Scott, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing fine. A little cool today. We were in the 40s.
Yeah, don't even go there. Don't even.
I had to throw the weather
Yeah, exactly,
thing.
exactly. Because that is a part of what Ben Stowe and I we make sure we like to, especially at this time of year. For those of you wondering, Scott is coming to us from the great state of Florida, and in Minnesota right now we are. Let's see. We're going to be probably close to 80 to 100 degrees colder here than what Scott was today. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I feel bad now.
Yeah. You do.
Have done that.
Just on the positive side, I think we're sending some of it down your direction. Maybe it won't get all the way to you, but yeah, it's that cold
It's
air.
supposed to be in the 30s in the morning.
Yeah, and that cold
so that's
air.
a warm front to you guys.
Oh my gosh, we're talking 30s on Saturday, and we're like shorts weather. Hello, when Ben Stowe comes back from Vegas, it'll his blood will have thinned a little bit while in Vegas, but when he gets back, it'll be like, oh my gosh, he left when it was 20 below, and he'll be coming back into the 20s and 30s.
You don't want hurricanes though. I will take it.
No, I will take my weather because I don't have earthquakes. I don't have hurricanes. Very seldom have tornadoes go through, so it's pretty
stuff like that.
Yeah, flooding is not much of an issue. We might get 5 or 6 inches of rain, but yeah, we're not gonna. I'm not gonna complain. Not going to complain at all. So, hey, so tonight's show, in all of our interview shows that we're doing here, they're sponsored by DJ Event Planner, DJEventPlanner.com. That link is in the description of the video. If you're looking for a service that helps you communicate and connect and really find clients with your website, you're to be able to use some tools that will help with that process. DJEventPlanner.com is a place to check that out. A lot of us here in DJNTV, we use that with our businesses, our mobile DJ business and our photo booth businesses, and it works wonderfully. So check that out, DJEventPlanner.com. So Scott, our little interviews have been kind of a getting to know for those who haven't gotten to meet a lot of my guests and such. So kind of give me today what you're doing in the entertainment world, and then we're going to go back and we're going to dig into the backstory of Scott Carroll. So what is the entertainment? What are you doing today these days?
What I'm doing these days is more of a smaller type of events. We're still doing larger, birthday parties and I would say general events, but our weddings have become a little smaller. They're 60, 50, 60 guests, somewhere around in there. We're using a smaller system, what allows us to adapt a little bit for their budget, helps them out a little bit better. But that's what we're doing. We've downsized what we carry out to do weddings with. And it's remarkable. It's really worked out because I don't have to take a lot of great big equipment. Don't have to take totems and lighting. I can just basically give them something that is compact. Thank God for the Evolve, or not the Evolve, but the Verse 8.
And we'll dig into more of that a little bit later because I want to definitely.
That's what we use, and that's what we do on that.
Yes. So getting into, you're still doing some weddings and such, and but more of the intimate type events is what you're doing today. So excellent. So I want to go on the other end of the spectrum, Scott. Let's go all the way back to a young Scott Carroll back in the day. Who was the one, or where was that? Where did your love of music start? Who was that person when it was influencing that?
My love of music probably came with even my first grade teacher going back because we do a lot of singing. I really enjoyed that. And at the time when I grew up and I was young in the late 60s and into the 70s, music was really on the pedestal back then. And you had a lot of bands coming out, everything from Aerosmith back into ZZ Top, Creedence Clearwater was coming out. I was into a lot of music that was like that. And that's really what inspired me to share it.
So going back to first grade, and I actually I think it was probably at first or second grade, there was a music teacher who was very, enjoyed that also. Do you ever find yourself kind of remembering some of the jingles or some of those songs from back in the day where you're like, oh yeah, there's that melody in my head for some reason?
Yeah. I mean, we do the old "Like to Sing on a Star," carry moonbeams home in a jar. Those type of those were little. They were silly when you look at it now, but back then it was really wow.
Yeah.
you learned, and we had a music teacher that would bring out the instruments, I call it the, what do you call the little
Oh
triangle,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
an opportunity to play. And we had a lot, and that's what they really inspired me music wise, because you had to love music for what was fixing to come up later on.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Throughout your school years, did you perform? As far as, did you play an instrument or anything, or
I
assist
I
vocal?
took guitar.
Okay.
I actually did get a chance to take guitar. I had most people have probably heard of Robert Conti at one time. Know who George Benson is.
Hmm.
A lot of those guys, they were great influence on me to play guitar, and I did that for a while. Was in a little band who worked great. We didn't go out and perform, but we were one of those bedroom bands
Yep.
that was around. And basically in the late '70s, that's what we tried to mimic, a lot of being ourselves, trying to be a rock star.
Sure.
That's primarily where I went with that. But I really found myself not really into wanting to play music and instruments as much as I wanted to be behind the scenes.
Hmm.
I found a more passion behind the scenes and all.
What was some of the early albums that you purchased? Because you would have been in the era where you were buying vinyl.
Well, yes.
I mean, what were some of the early ones that you remember you picked up?
Well, I can. Peter Frampton Comes Alive was probably the first album that I saved my money and bought that album, because I mean it had some great tunes on it back then. Feel Like We Do and Show Me the Way. I mean, there was a lot of different, but I would say that was the first one that I ever really pivoted on. And then got into Eric Clapton, and that's where my music line was more of the rock era.
Yeah.
At the beginning of that, and then devolved into other genres as well. But that was my first passion on that. Was those were the first ones I got.
So how did that evolution? Because I grew up in a household where my father was into a lot of the 60s and 70s and more of the rock side of things. Then all of a sudden, here came this disco beat. Was that something that kind of connected with you at that time, or was it something that came later in appreciation for that?
It did, because in the, I'll say, late '70s into early '80s, that's when I started playing around with turntables and learning different things, and kind of picking up that idea of maybe becoming a disc jockey. Getting a chance to, when Rapper's Delight came out, got an opportunity to play that. It was on, I mean, and that's when your 12-inch records came out. Casablanca stuff came out during that time, which Donna Summer was on. Some of those records were one-sided. They only had one song on one side of it. The other was never grooved.
I've never seen that.
Yeah,
I've never seen that.
I worked teen discos back in the early '80s when I was still in high school. And that's how I really said, you know what, this might be something I might want to try and do.
So how did you find yourself I mean, your love of music was coming, but to take that and actually perform, who was one that kind of got you into that, or how did you make that transition?
I had, I think our era, I would say, growing up, you made the decision what you wanted to do. My family, my grandfather was a doctor. I really didn't want to go into that. They all wanted me to, but I decided, you know what? I'd like to get on the radio. And I brought that up in school. Oh, you'll never be able to get into radio. Hold that thought. I think I even took a few wagers on that, and some people lost on that. But I went ahead and got into broadcasting after I got out of school, graduated. I said, I'm going into broadcasting. And at the time, you had to have full-time broadcasters. You didn't have all the stuff you have now. I mean, just there. But that's what I decided to do, and I got into that. And that was my early start, really starting to enjoy music. I wasn't a country fan, but first radio station I worked at was in gospel. And it was like, whoa, this is different. But it gave me that pedestal that to get up on top of to learn. It got the door open for me. And then I did other genres and worked in other areas of radio. I did sales. I found myself doing that. And with even that further going down the line, that's how the mobile DJing got started, which was by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was truly by accident. And you probably would ask, well, how? Live broadcasts were a big thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
And people would come up with us, hey, I had a birthday party, and the older guys were looking at me going, you're the 20-year-old.
Yep.
You can do it.
You can stay up half the night. We didn't.
You can do it. Well, they didn't realize that they were paying $400 for 4 hours back in 81, 82. So at the time, I said, well, what's it going to take? So I went and found out what I needed. Technique 1200s were the standard.
Yep.
So I got money, saved up. All the deposits that I was taking in paid for that stuff, paid for my mixer, paid for my amps, because at the time you had no powered speakers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of how I got into it. Weddings were further down the line, and I'll explain that when you ask a little bit later. Yeah. I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole on that. I didn't start out doing weddings at first. I was doing birthday parties, class reunions, family reunions, very simple events to start with.
Sure.
I did not want to go into something that I didn't know much about. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like that I was going to be comfortable enough to do it. And I just didn't. I didn't take that. So I stayed real simple to start with.
And did your radio experience, were you on the microphone while you were doing your early broadcasting? So people were able to hear you on the microphone and such. And then did that translate? Because when I first started, a lot of my early shows, I very, very seldom spoke on a microphone. How was the microphone really a part of your early shows?
Yeah, because you were formatted back then. You had to follow the format. You had a hot clock, which they called it. And you talked after every couple of songs. And the radio station, a lot of your small market stations, nothing was carded back then. Cards were expensive. They used them only for commercials. Mm-hmm. And card for people, what in the world is that? It looks like an 8-track tape, but it was a looped where it would automatically cue back up when it was done. So all you had to do was hit start button and it would play. And I actually got an opportunity to play 45s on the radio. I had local people that were local bands that would cut a 45. We had a business card taped to the 45. I've had so many people when I work country, who is that? Man, I like this. Does this guy have a phone number? And we would give them the phone number. And
small time radio.
And what would happen was they would get a call. Hey, we want to put this guy on. We want to get him more airplay, but we've got him a record contract. Really? He said, yeah, you guys playing his music like you did have gotten him, more exposure. And we saw that with a lot of small market radio. Atlanta, a group called Atlanta, got their start that way. Somebody had heard them. They'd done a independent pressing and heard them, and by God, they picked them up. And
so at that time with the radio, then was there a list of songs? I mean, Jim Cerrone talks about that there's the songs that, these commonly played ones, and then some you can sprinkle in, and then with some but there's
had currents. You had what they call currents, which you got the overplay. And then you had recurrents, where stuff that had been on the charts, but it dropped down below the top 20.
Yep.
So everything in the current was in the top 20. Anything past that, going into the top 40, was in recurrent. And then you had another rotation. And believe it or not, there were index cards. And you rotated the index cards. When you pulled the index card up, it would give you the track and it would tell you the album. So you'd actually have to come in. I would come in and pull all that music for a 6-hour. I would go in and pull all my cards, and I would rubber band them together for each hour, because you did 6 hours on the radio. Yes. Mm-hmm. You did 6 hours with voice on the radio.
Oh, my goodness.
You did not. It wasn't 4 hours. unless you were a medium market or major market. But
Yeah.
small market, you come in, say you were a morning drive guy, 6 a.m. to 12 noon. And then from noon until 6 p.m., and then 6 p.m. until midnight, and then midnight to 6 a.m.
Oh,
That's the way the rotation went for the shifts. And I was always the 6 p.m. or midnight to 6. I did get, before I left out of radio, I was on the noon, which I felt honored. I was on a noon from noon until 6 p.m. and they were live. You didn't voice track.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have all that. Didn't have that stuff. When I last radio, I left when they started going syndication.
Oh, sure.
Going to that, I was actually voice tracking the day before. And yeah, you voice tracked a 4-hour show, and that's the way you do it now. But back then, everything was live, and it was, you just, if it went out, you did not try to put the toothpaste back in the tube. You could not. If you made a mistake, you kept going.
Yep.
If you backed up, they knew you ran over something.
Yep.
But if you kept going and nobody noticed it, I noticed it because I would record air checks. That's how I did improvement. Critiquing was a main thing, especially when that Arbitron rating would come out. Because, yeah, you could be on the chopping block. But, getting into that was just, it was fun. I enjoyed that. Radio was, did not pay much. I made more off the clubs and on the mobile DJ end of it. And I was doing all three at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my 20s and I was able to do that. Not anymore. I can't do that anymore.
But boy, you've hit a couple of points. The idea of recording a performance. You were doing that back in the early 80s with the radio station. But I mean, that's a huge thing that we talk about now in the industry, is to record our introduction to the wedding party and record these things to look at and kind of critique and see, what is our facial expressions? How are we coming across to the guests and such? And here you were doing that kind of stuff way back then. And then the idea, and Jim Cerrone was probably the first person I heard really talk about that. If you make a mistake, you just carry on like nothing happened.
Nothing happened. And what was great is we had some great engineers that what they did was, we had a boom box we'd set on the floor, and we had a plug underneath there that you could plug it in. And every time you pop the switch on the mic to go on the air, it would start your deck down there because it was hooked to the remote, and it was also fed lined, so anything coming out of the board
would be recorded.
Would go to that.
Yeah.
So we had engineers that hey, we'll rig you up something for it, and they did all that. Turntables had stop, count clocks, so you knew not to walk over the vocals and things like that. Where when you started the turntable, it would reset and it would count down the intro for you. Now everything's all done automated. It will literally, now with the new software, as long as you're talking, it keeps that intro in a loop until it doesn't hear you any longer, and then it
goes.
Then it counts.
That's interesting, because I've heard a couple of times when the announcer's been talking and you were walking over the vocals, and we've talked about posting the song, that you're talking during that before the vocals, and you're talking, introducing, and boom, there's the vocals, and you get cut off just before it.
And I've heard if you were good, you could post it right when you could announce the title of the artist, and then they'd start singing. We called that posting back then. If you were good at that, they loved you for that.
Oh, exactly. And
never walk over that.
My boys laugh when I'm introducing, and it's like, no, start the song. And they're like, but you wanted to talk, right? Yeah, start the song. I know this. I got it. Boom, the vocals start, and they're like, wow, you timed that just right. And it's like, yeah, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been doing this for a number of years, and you get a feel for it after a while. But I've heard it, though. You mentioned the weird, that looping thing. I've heard that a couple of times where the beginning of a song, it's like, wait a second, that didn't sound right while they're talking. That would explain it. I've wondered how that happened, and if the software will automatically do that, that would explain why
I've done that with stems, by the way.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. In that realm. But I mean, this was I don't believe it was a radio station. It wasn't a stems type of a thing like you and I would use today. It's just kind of, it's like, I don't remember that long of an intro on that song when I played it. What's up? They have a different version? What's up with that?
It's something they have built into the
Yeah.
integrated into the software. And most of those, believe it or not, they're using, I'm going to make you happy, Megaseg.
Woohoo! Everyone's having
I'd go there. Somebody's saying, "Why did he go down that? Why did he go down that?"
He went there before I did. Wow, that's a team player, Scott. We appreciate.
Well, and they use them in radio stations.
That is a huge part of it. For those of you who have ever checked out Megaseg, is a software that is proprietary to the Apple system, and they utilize that in many of radio stations, and many mobile DJs use it. I still use it. Virtual DJ is my main one for performance, but if I'm doing ceremony, there's some control and flexibility and things that I can do with Megaseg that I cannot do with Virtual DJ. So,
well, we had a radio station with a great budget in it, and had kind of IMAX, and they had that. And when you went live, they prefer that you use that software because we had a lot of people that they didn't know the music.
Yeah,
some of them didn't know it, and if you don't know it, you need to get to know it, listen to it before you. They would tell us, and I still say to this day, listen to a song if you're not familiar with it. You need to anyway, so you know what's going on with it.
Yeah, and so many people don't even bother to preview or look at lyrics or anything, and it's like, oh man, you got to do these things, little things.
But that was our radio adventure.
Yeah.
Between, what's come up to now. And everything else, it's totally different now. It's more, they pay these people to voice track. They're usually national. They do several radio stations. Usually they're not VH1. I'm trying to remember the company. They'll set them up. I think it's Westwood One.
Yep.
Westwood One Network is what they use now.
Yeah. There's a few of the stations, and many of them in our area have become iHeart, the iHeart world, and
cheap channel we used to.
Yeah, it is what it is there.
Yeah, and they're all about making the money. That's the business part.
It is. It's all in that. And sometimes it works, and sometimes some of our favorite stations get irreparably changed, and it's like, well, all right, we just head off and do another thing. So let's wrap up. Let's wrap up your radio experience, which is going to take us forward and such. But just kind of take me through now. So your early days, you were doing that. Then you started in mobile, and we're going to come back and pick up the mobile when you started your wedding side of it. But over the years now, how have you continued in the radio side of it, and when did you kind of wrap that up, or how is that going?
I wrapped up probably really just couple of years ago. In 2022, I was doing voice tracking, and they brought a sales analogist in, and that's where the Westwood One network started coming in. They got away from a lot of the local guys coming in and doing this, and they wanted more sales than they did anything else. So at the time, I was working full time. Plus, I was coming in doing voice tracking every afternoon for a while. But then, like I said, there was a change of analysis on that, and they went a different direction. So some of us did lose out on that, which I had a good ride while it lasted. That's how I looked at it. I got to do at least 3 years back in it again to see, because I left it before it went computer. I was still, when I left, we were doing carts and reel to reel. We're getting away from the record part of it. We weren't doing records or vinyl. It started going further in, and then in the 90s is when CDs, and I did have an opportunity to do radio with CDs in the 90s. So I did get a small portion of that. That was a big change from going from records to the CDs, because they really had to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Special. We had Denon. Denon was our friend. We had Denon dual decks and decks that you could not push the button while it was playing and open the drawer unless you stopped it.
Oh, yep.
because if you hit that door open button, it's done.
Yeah, we got a lot of data really quick.
Yeah, and then correcting skips in the CDs, all that kind of stuff. That was a different era, totally. I liked CDs because of the compact part of
Mm-hmm.
it, but the other part of it, we didn't really want to. The change did not want to happen.
Mm.
A lot of us that were like, no, this is, we can't records we could put our hands on,
Yep.
and that was a big change. The compact and availability of it, and it getting a little cheaper helped us out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it
Definitely.
was it was a helpful thing.
Yeah, definitely was.
But yeah, getting into that, that's where it. I ended probably with radio because I'd done it off and on since 1982, off and on up until about 2022. I
Okay.
would do part-time stuff. I would do commercials and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
they were all just part-time. Hey, can you do this for me? Yeah, I can do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
You owe me one. Okay. And that's how that happened.
So, did you have a radio voice that you used, or were you just kind of more like?
I I did, but what happened, because you have to make it a little more forceful, a little more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start talking like that, that really didn't want you to talk that way. They called you a puking disc jockey, the Wolfman Jack type thing.
Oh yeah.
They wanted you to use your own voice, and I found that was where I needed to be at. Now, if I was doing a commercial that was hyped, then yeah, I'd have to do the hype thing. You would have to do it. My wife cringes every time I do the radio voice and go, "No, don't do that.
Ah,
It's not you." But it was a matter of sales. It was a
yep.
point of getting something out. Um, People say, "Well, what about the guy that could say 20 words in less than 5 seconds?" There's only been one other guy I know that does it. He used to do FedEx commercials, but there's a trick that they used to do, speeding up and slowing down on the tape in order to make it what we call the disclaimer.
Yes.
The disclaimer and now it's they used to, the Cool Edit Pro was one of the best things to be able
Oh
to
yeah.
speed
Remember
you
that?
up
Yes.
and slow you down. But there's tricks to that, and that's why you had to do the disclaimer. But yeah, the radio voice, I like to be myself, and I do that even when I do introductions.
Sure.
I mean, it just comes across better. And I see a lot of guys still getting up there, ladies and gentlemen. Oh,
Yep.
ladies germs,
Yep.
come on, please.
Well,
Just
let's
be yourself.
Yep, we'll head to the things. Day mentioned Clear Channel was the other one I was trying to think of. That is very prevalent in our market up here. It's basically
Oh,
Clear
okay.
Channel, or it's some of the Odyssey stuff, or the Odyssey network, the big ones. So thank you for being with us tonight, Day, and thanks for that. So let's jump back. Earlier, you were doing the parties and things. What transitioned you to weddings? What was the draw that pulled you from just doing some backyard type beer party type things, and then all of a sudden you're a wedding DJ?
I did not jump into weddings full force, and I will tell everyone, get a mentor.
Mm.
Please don't jump into weddings thinking you're going to be on top with it. I went out with a lot of guys that's all they did. They were wedding DJs back then. I learned some things that were great habits and some things that were not so great to do at a wedding. First and foremost, if you love to party and love to drink, weddings, you got to slow the row on doing that, because the worst thing you can do is have an intoxicated disc jockey at your wedding. And I've had that happen with people that work for me. Later on, I had a multi-op. Few guys that work for me like to drink. And I said, that's the end of multi-op. It really put a bad taste in my mouth, because you had open bars back then.
Oh,
People
yeah.
would drink. They just, you're working. You don't do that. And, the other parties backyard parties that we would do, yeah, you'd have a few drinks, But weddings, I had to get a mentor and someone that would help me to be able, because we didn't have all that we have today.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Disc Jockey News, the tidbits that we get from everything, the expos that we go to, conventions, they have so much information that you need that. But we didn't get that back then. So you had to find someone that had done weddings and knew what you were looking for. And also, when I did clubs, I had a mentor because they taught me how to beat mix.
Hmm.
I had no idea. You go into radio and man, we just let the thing play out to the end. And I had to relearn how to be a disc jockey coming out of radio into clubs, and then the everything else sort of just followed into line with it. But weddings were something that you had to get an education on.
Yeah.
You had to pull that from someone who has done many. And I found somebody that they'd been in the business a lot longer than I had, and it had learned what you need to do, the introductions,
Different aspects.
the different things that they would do, taking requests from guests, but doing it in a more elegant type way than what we're used to doing. Because I was being from the South, did a lot of redneck parties, so it was a little bit different than being a little bit more focused as far as what weddings. And I went and learned, and that's how I did it. A lot of my friends jumped into it cold feet. And if you do a bad wedding, it can hurt you all the way through your mobile DJ career if you're not careful.
For a number of years, for sure. So you were working radio, you were doing the parties, then you transitioned. Did you then go work for someone as a mobile DJ for a while to learn the wedding side, or did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to work for several agencies, and and I got a couple of guys together saying, "Hey," I told them I was completely honest. I'd never done weddings before. Oh, you'll be fine with it. I spent a year. I spent about. I didn't really do my first wedding until probably about 84, 85. Because I was not comfortable with being able to let go of it. And the first wedding I did, the guy couldn't. He was sick. My mentor had actually got sick.
Oh my goodness! Yep, and you're thrown into the fire.
And I'm like, you talk about a nail biting experience. I made it through, and I did great. And there was nothing like we have now as far as what they would do is we would hand them. These are 10 songs you get to pick for your first dance. Here's a book. Go through the book, write down everything that you like me to play during your reception. Because I didn't do many ceremonies back then. It was mostly church weddings, got married in the church. They would take the reception to another area off grounds because most churches did not allow, especially in the South, did not allow dancing, even first dance in the church. But we would give them a list. First dance, father-daughter, mother-son dance. There was a receiving line before there was ever an introduction. So all that had to be done, and it was done as a beginning. Now we just introduced the bridal party. Now it's more of a receiving line that takes up time before you even did the first dance. Things have changed.
Oh yeah.
I had to learn that, and I didn't know nothing about it. I'm like, okay,
so
that's how we have to do it. And there wasn't that books. There's books out now till it just makes it.
Yeah, so many sources for education.
I mean, it's amazing what's out there, and I still learn. Oh, I didn't know it could do that. And we picked up. I did a lot of weddings, cultural weddings, especially when I was down South Florida, Jamaican weddings, Puerto Rico. People from Puerto Rico. Those weddings are culturally different, and I just did a wedding here not too long ago that I had to have an interpreter. I haven't had that in years.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
but
literally had an interpreter that did all the introductions. All I did was push buttons.
mm-hmm.
Great wedding, easy wedding to do because 95% of everyone there spoke Spanish. There was that only 5% that was bilingual, and everyone else didn't speak a lick of English. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to have that. But
Mm-hmm.
those are the things you learn off of when you do a wedding. It
Yeah.
really is.
You
But
mentioned
that's
you mentioned
go
earlier,
ahead.
Scott, there that early on of handing the book out, and that was flashing back to those when we were just, we had CDs and we had a few albums, but we would type up that full music list and we would hand them like 30 pages, front and back, and they hand them this stapled thing, and they would go through and highlight, and then they would hand you that back at some point in time of the wedding process. You just brought back memories of that. And then at the show, paging through. Okay, here's one that they highlighted like on page 17. Okay, paging through. Oh, here's another one on page 20. Yeah, good.
And we didn't meet out like how we meet now,
Not
at
a
least
not a
30
bit.
days before. We didn't do that back then.
Didn't know to.
I would meet 10 days before their wedding. I would sit down with them and go over it. We didn't have the contracts that we had back then. I had a rental agreement, and basically what I was doing was you're renting the time, and that's how we did it
Mm-hmm.
until terms of agreement stuff came out. The early business side of that, and we had to learn all that. It was
Mm-hmm.
just we didn't know, but
Our
brides now got more. They got more choices than they had back then
Oh,
too.
and in our first contract, I found one of them the other day, of like first probably 2 or 3 shows, one of the, and they would cut the bottom of the sheet. It was like the bottom 2 inches of the sheet of paper. And the top basically talked about, it was cover letter or whatever. And they would cut it off, and it became about the size of the check that they would send in for the deposit. That's how we did it back then. And
Oh,
didn't think
yeah,
anything, we thought we were doing really well, which at the time we probably were, but how things have changed.
yeah. I mean, it just, and I look back at that, and that really has been, correct change on that. But like I said, I didn't dive into weddings at first, and
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't done weddings, I suggest a mentor. I really do, and that's just my recommendation. Go out with a few times and just kind of, just kind of shadow with somebody, just see, because sometimes that may not be what you want to do. I
And
mean,
yep, I've run into numerous DJs over the years who have gotten in and they were like, "Oh, wow, there's good money to be made doing weddings. Book, 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 because I can book it at a cheaper rate than the other guys." And then they get into it 6 months and they're like, "Okay, I hate weddings and I'm never wanting to do them again." Whereas if they would have taken the time to shadow someone, to go and learn more about the backside of a wedding, and
yeah,
say, like my boys, they initially, when they saw the backside of weddings, because they went with me, and they're like, "Yeah, we want nothing to do with this." Didn't want to. Not. It wasn't until Michael was in his 20s, but in his teen years, he thought weddings were just a very
yeah, no,
unfun event, for lack of a better way to
I,
describe it. He used
I
different
had
language, but
some of the best club DJs go out with me to do a wedding.
I believe, yeah.
Scott, you can have that.
I don't want it. Get it
I
away
don't
from me.
want it. I would rather spend all night running vinyl, because that's what we did back then, is running between 1 and 3 turntables I had in the club I worked in. And I would work up a sweat. I literally carried a sweat towel with me because one sweat hits a record, and boom, I've had that happen. I've had it slide caused by one drop of sweat
Yeah, I know.
hitting hitting on the vinyl, and it caught it. And when it did, oh, what a train wreck. That's the reason I always tell somebody, have something ready in case something happens, because you never know when that's going to happen. And it's true today, Terry. I really believe that with streaming, the future, wrapping this and going forward on this, I still don't trust streaming. I know a lot of people that are really wanting to get into doing it, and I'm the network, just getting my internet back here right before we
Yeah,
got started
exactly.
on
You've
the
had
show.
experience with this, and my Saturday night, it wasn't that I needed it for streaming, but I needed it for the software for taking requests Saturday night in the karaoke world. And my connection wasn't solid enough. So it worked and it didn't, and it worked and it didn't. And we got into that last hour and a half, and it didn't really work the last hour and a half. And people were like, well, we're just going to come up and talk to you, which is certainly fine. But, you've got this capability to do some really cool things, but it's all predicated on.
I know we got about 5 or 6 minutes left.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Really, what what's some of the other things you?
Well, let's kind of wrap up now. I want to talk a little bit more. And by the way, thanks for Ken is with us. Let's see, Nuke, I believe it is with us there. So thank you guys for making comments and such. Yep, the Chicago, the Marquee show is going to be coming up here in June in Chicago, so you'll be able to check that out. Must be in Kenneth's backyard there. I can't see fully on that, so I just see a little bit. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned downsizing, and this is actually an area in which I have also been, have done over the last number of years. Part of it due to the quality of the gear and different things, but give me an idea of when you were out there with some of your bigger shows, what kind of things were you running, and then we're going to compare and contrast to what you've kind of settled into today with your smaller weddings.
Well, so we were running those PVCS 800s and 400s, and we had them all in a rack.
Oh my goodness!
And you reeled the rack in, and the coffin with the turntables would set on top of them.
Yep.
Then we have what they call stack speakers. They would stack, bottom end would be 8. It would go 8, 4, and 2 being your piezo banks at the top.
Oh my.
We had stack speakers back then. We didn't have the pole speakers that they have now and everything else. And all of that had to be ground with crossovers. I had to literally get a sound engineer to help set that thing up. I mean, it's just, what was set, we rolled in and you were done. We didn't have the great quality cordless mics back then. Mm-hmm. We had to run sometimes 50-foot corded. Of course, the SM58s, Sures were
still, they were there then.
And we used them, and that's what pretty much what I had gear-wise, and it was heavy. Mm-hmm. You had to lift that stuff up, and I always had to take 2 people, even when I was younger. Of course, then when powered speakers started coming out, that was helpful. But I had ran, before I even switched over to power, I had a set of PV 358s. And the reason we went with PV is because they were American-made company at the time. It was durable. I never, ever had a PV amp catch fire or mess up. Now, I've had fans get caught in them and they get hot and they're thermal and shut down, but never had one that actually, I had a QSC one time, but that's a different story in itself. It did not thermal like it should have, and we had a little blaze coming out of the back of it, but those things happen. And that's what we started with, and then the powered speakers started coming in, and I never had used electro voice until I got introduced to it in the Z series and with the Evolve 50s, and now they've even evolved even further. Woo! But I mean, that's just, and the Everse 8s were a dream. I said, I wish they'd have had those things years ago. I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah, because we had you had the 358s. We had my first ones were 388s. So it would have been, I believe the 358s was a three-way cabinet with a 15-inch. Was it a 15 in that, or is it?
Yeah, it had a 15.
It must have had a 5. There we go. It must have had the 15, and it had a 5-inch mid and then the horn. And I think the 388
I had a Black Widow as the 15 in mine.
Yep, and that was, and then the 388 had an 8-inch mid. And it
never blew that thing.
Never blew them. We ran those things. CS800s were bulletproof. I mean, if you had needed to, you could, jack up your truck and put a CS800 under there, and take a. They were just a beast. It's ironic. We talked about those last week on with Ben Stowe, the CS800. For those of you who have never witnessed the CS800, you almost it's like a piece of it's like the the SM58. It's one of those.
Anvil. It's heavier than an anvil.
They're hugely heavy. They went digital eventually, the CS800S, which brought the weight down a bit. But the old ones, and you can go and they're still out there and they're still running, and 40 years later,
I hated to sell those things, but at the time I needed the money.
Oh, so now it's more of a nostalgia thing. It's not that they were the cleanest amps.
They sold for almost what I paid for them.
Yeah, I believe it. I really believe it. Those things were they were something. Yeah, and the three, I had the 388s when Lori and I first were together, and then we we went with two shows, and then so I had gotten some 358s, thinking that they're smaller and lighter. No, they're not that much lighter, not from a female perspective. So we had to go a different direction. But
John, wrapping up on this, and one reason I've downsized, when you get older, and I'm reaching 60. Oh, my 61, 62. I'm still a young guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to do this. I'm going to be like the guy in the Geico commercial, the old DJ that's still out there, with his ones and twos. And he's still, because I have a passion.
Yeah, you enjoy it. Yes.
I'm doing it. Even though I don't do it full time like I used to, burning the candles at both ends, I feel like if you still have a passion, you need to keep going at it. You learn all the time the new stuff that comes out that makes it easier on you. Even hire somebody if you have to and pay them a little bit to help you load and unload. That's all they do. And most of them they'll leave and come back. I've had that where I've had big stuff set up and I hired a guy. He came and helped me set up. I said, you can go do whatever and then just be back here at this time. I'll call you if I go into overtime. And he come back and I paid him and he helped me load the gear back up. And I've done that a few times.
Mm-hmm. But I think you're as you're talking earlier about the Everse world that's out there, and many of those small cabinets. I mean, there are probably 8 and 10 inch cabinets that could stand toe to toe with our old PV speakers.
Oh yeah,
the technology has come so far that it's a lot easier. Truthfully, I've done shows with those Everse tops, the 8-inch Everse tops, and a 12-inch sub, 3 speakers. And I technically could carry all 3 of them, if it wouldn't be for the, just being kind of clumsy. They're not that heavy. And yet they can put out a lot for most of them.
Someone said they took an Everse 12 and turned all the top end off of it and ran that Everse 12 as a sub.
As a sub?
Ooh, I know.
It wouldn't give you the full woofer effect, but I mean, it would give you something.
It would give you some fill. I know Ben's probably like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Because the biggest difference between a sub the woofer in that and the two is the magnets. There's much larger magnets in those subs, and there's much more protrusion that can happen.
But I thought about that, but no, that taking the Evolve 50 sub, and I just wanted to see how it would do with running the Everse 8s, and it was fine.
Yeah, it can work. Yep.
And it worked great. I didn't need anything that was powerhouse. I just needed to fill the 8s so they had a little bit more of the bottom end.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that at several weddings where I've got a bigger room, and I didn't want to bring the Evolve 50s, which I love taking those Evolve 50s out. I mean, no complaints on those speakers whatsoever. People walk by them. I've had them set up in tight rooms where where the dinner line was crossing in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
But things like that, I mean, being able to downsize, that it helps you to still continue enjoy being in the entertainment world. And all the photo booth now we include it in as a package.
Sure.
I don't sell it separately. It's there. As Brian would say, it's the champagne fountain. It's the champagne fountain. And it's an enhancement to what I use. Mm-hmm. And I set it up in the same room, but not going down that has been, something that I've been able to do to help as far as even when I downsize, and all, then doing smaller gigs. I don't do school proms anymore.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
got younger guys I call to do those. Pick and choose what you do as you get older.
Hmm.
When you're younger, yeah, it's great to get experience in every aspect of what we do. But when you get older, you can do that. Don't feel that you have to do everything.
Yeah. And I think that's it makes a person happier, and it's going to not be the abuse on the body, because, we don't handle 50, 60, 70 pound subs as well as we once did.
And if you're going to do this full time, set yourself some retirement. Have yourself some retirement benefit, because God forbid you get injured, something happens to you, you're going to have that, because Social Security, I feel like for me, I have a state retirement on both ends of what I have.
Mm-hmm.
I retired from the state once. I was able to start back up and start another one. It's not going to be as big as what I have, but I have that. I have insurance. That's the other thing, is check into group insurance for healthcare if you run a small entertainment business. It's some ideas to throw out there.
Yeah.
Go get ordained, become an officiant.
Yeah.
I can go further on down the line.
Oh yeah, there's lots of little things that can be added to it.
Those little things will really help you, and you can continue enjoying your passion.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't enjoy music, you really don't need to. Don't think of it as, oh my God, what you keep looking at your watch, hoping that it will,
be 12 o'clock quicker. Yeah, come on.
Right. You don't need to be in that business.
Yeah, exactly. Then
I've had to stop myself. I went 20, 25 minutes over one time, and I said, oh my God, if I hit 30 minutes, I would have probably end up having to say, hey, I accidentally went into overtime, but they walked up and going, man, we're having so much fun. We forgot what time it was.
Yeah.
So,
yep, it happens.
It does. Well, John,
Scott. No, it was great to catch up and such. And if there's anyone out there who would like to, especially as you're talking about, how you're doing things today as you're getting near to those retirement years, but somebody would like to kind of pick your mind about some ideas, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Probably, I would say you could probably go on my Facebook page, Scott Carroll Entertainment.
Okay. Yep, Scott Carroll Entertainment, and they can find you there, and they can reach out and message you there.
Reach out to me there.
Yeah.
That'd probably be the easiest way. I would say email, but I think with the Facebook is probably the easiest way.
Excellent.
And that's how we all stay in touch.
It is. For a lot of us, that's what we do. So, hey, Scott, thank you for being on. And again, tonight's show is being brought to you by DJ Event Planner, DJEventPlanner.com. The link is in the description of this video. The web tools that you can use for booking events, for doing digital contracts and music requests, everything. It's all there. DJEventPlanner.com. Scott, thank you once again, and we'll catch up with you next time.
One more thing. Don't forget, click on the comments below, too, now.
Yeah, there's definitely the comments in the likes section right below the video.
Exactly. Make sure you do that.
Yeah.
I meant to mention that myself. You got the advertising part of it, but I had to hit
there
that.
you are. Good stuff. Thanks,
Thank
Scott. All right. We'll be back in about 5-7 minutes, somewhere in there, 5 to 7. Yeah. With our second show tonight, we got Cubby and Dan coming in. We're going to talk about the top 200 songs coming up here for this wedding season.